I am going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to Friday of Geography Awareness Week. My name's Tom Herman. I'm the director of the California Geographic Alliance. So I would welcome you on behalf of the CGA, but also the California Global Education Project, which supports global competency in geographic literacy in California students. I'm also proudly displaying my SDSU gear today and representing the San Diego State Department of Geography. And as we have done several of the past years, we've been able to assemble an excellent group of guest speakers from the department, graduate students, and we do try and recruit faculty, but this is my moment to say, yeah, graduate students doing the work. Showing up and giving the presentations and representing the discipline. I myself was a graduate student in the department in the 1990s and started, well, as far as I know, started the tradition of doing Geography Awareness Week outreach. And so awesome to see some of my fellow SDSU geographers filling in and keeping that tradition going. So anyway, enough with the formality. We will get to those awesome speakers soon. This is where we hope our slides advance the way they're supposed to. All right, so all week I've been kind of sharing essential geography education resources and trying to point out the really big entities that people should know about. And so this one is one that's maybe not quite as directly useful in the day-to-day work of teachers and students at the K-12 level, but I wanted you to know about it because the American Association for Geographers is really the organization that within the United States has the most significant role in supporting and kind of leading the discipline of geography. So the students, the graduate students that you're going to meet today and myself, we're all members of this association. And when we use the term the AAG, you know, like people say, I'm going to take the 5 and they mean Interstate 5 freeway. Well, when we say we're going to go to the AAG, we mean the conference annual meeting that's held each year. This year, it's going to be completely virtual, but usually a different city in the United States, and 5,000 or 6,000 geographers will converge and share ideas and present their research. It's an exciting head-spinning time for geographers. So you should know about that because some of you out there that are maybe 9th grade students and having your first experience learning geography are going to see that there's excellent not only career opportunities in geography, but there's some exciting experiences to be had studying geography at colleges and universities in California. So AAG this year put together some awesome images for Geography Awareness Week that I will humbly admit I just discovered last night. So I'm showing them to you all at once. But their theme that they picked for this year of Know Your World, Geoliteracy for a Complex Time, I think is pretty cool. I will also mention that the CGA specifically and SDSU Geography Department is working with the AAG on an exciting project, really looking at bringing together computational thinking and geographic thinking. And as this article I clipped here says, computational thinking is really not about computers so much as it's about applying critical thinking to analyze and understand data that's available to you. So the AAG isn't just an organization that's bringing together university level scholars. They're also interested in the well-being of geography education at every level. And this is something that they're contributing to help think about what geography should look like in the future in schools so that we can get beyond where we are right now, where geography is not taught nearly enough. And when it is taught, it maybe doesn't reflect the cutting edge of the discipline. Okay, so I also want to share resources that you could use and explore right now. So for today, I picked the native land map. And so this is just a little slide I put together from a snapshot. I'll flip over to the website in a minute. What this map does is it overlays a modern map of not just the United States, but actually the world with historical geographic information about the territorial ranges of different indigenous peoples. And so it doesn't just have their territorial ranges and kind of put them on the map, but also gives you information about the language relationships and the languages that were spoken in different places, and the process by which their land was essentially taken from them, either through treaties, which were sometimes coerced, or through cessation, or cession, actually, which transferred ownership to the federal government. So in this case, I just put together a quick map that's my own personal geographic history. I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and you see here some of the tribal territories that I was in when I was born. I moved to southern New Jersey and Washington, D.C., and then went to college at Villanova, interestingly in and out of the Lenape territory. Then I moved out to New Mexico State towards the Apache territory, and now in San Diego, where I am now, this was the Kumeyaay Nation. And so it's not just important to know the history of your place in terms of being respectful of indigenous Native American land claims, but there's all kinds of other levels of history that you can investigate and that you should be more informed about to understand what the meaning is of the place that you find yourself on the Earth's surface. So I'm going to switch over to, I'm going to stop sharing that. And I'm going to share my, we'll see if I can figure this out. And here's a web page that I just shared. The disclaimer, if you first open it, that says essentially this is not legally accurate at every level. This is an attempt to put useful information together. So let's see if I still have it there. I just grabbed the address of the Capitol building in Sacramento and thought that would be a good example to see. So it zooms in right on the Capitol Mall in Sacramento, and we see that it's Nisenan territory. You could also switch to the treaties layer and turn off the territories and actually track back the piece of legislation by which that territory was legally taken by the United States. So that's kind of an interesting tool that you can use to investigate basically the history and the continuity of ownership of the land that you find yourself on in the United States. Okay, so see if we can navigate back to the PowerPoint just for a moment. We might be able to. So we're taking a virtual journey back to Storm Hall, 3rd floor. I don't know about my guests, but for me, it's a little bit wistful because I haven't really been there in a few months. This is the door the sign we would normally see as we approach the door of the building where the faculty and graduate student offices are. And I'm super excited that what goes on inside that building is coming outside the building through the internet today. So I'm gonna go ahead and introduce the first of our speakers, Thomas Smith, who is a graduate student. Well, everybody I'm gonna introduce is a graduate student and a geographer with something, special knowledge and an interest within geography that they're gonna share. So Thomas, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully everyone can hear me clearly, but I'll start my quick little show. So here, for a brief little bit about me, I'm from Los Angeles, California. I got a BA in Geography and History from University of California, Santa Barbara, UCSB. I'm currently an MS Geography student at SDSU. I teach the Geography 101L Earth's Physical Environment Laboratory course, and my research interests are remote sensing, 3D remote sensing, GIS, etc. But as we mentioned actually previously, one thing I want to note is that way back in the day of about 2012 or so, you know, a long time ago, I was your age in 9th grade in a geography course in high school. I believe we have a 9th grade class here, if I recall correctly. But it was a geography course in high school that I believe set me on the path of liking geography. So just a little fun note that I saw. But anyways, so a bit about remote sensing. I think this might have been touched on a little bit beforehand, but it's something key to my research interests, so I just want to touch on it briefly. Remote sensing is, to quote, the collection of data about features or phenomena of the Earth's surface and near surface without being in direct contact with the features or phenomena. Or put in more simple terms, it's using cameras and sensors of various types, you know, everything from radar and lasers to, you know, normal image cameras of all sorts and types to learn more about the Earth. You know, this can be whether it's on, you know, as you can see here, either it's on a satellite or, you know, a UAV or a drone, you know, which you probably heard about these days, or an airplane or a very long pole or a ladder or a kite. Kites are a fun platform. But that's remote sensing, you know, trying to learn about the Earth without, you know, being right next to the thing you're trying to learn. You know, you're not digging holes in the ground, that kind of thing. So my research involves three-dimensional remote sensing in shadows. Three-dimensional remote sensing is just 3D, so, you know, it's not 2D flat, it's 3D. So you have 3 dimensions, you know, length, width, and height. Goodness, that's not quite how all things work. But so this includes ways to get this includes LiDAR, photogrammetry, structure from motion. What you end up getting is a 3D representation of the world. It's kind of like a video game where you have, if I may, you know, as you can see here in this image, we have shadows and the like. It may look flat, but you would be able to rotate this and see different perspectives and the like. So what I'm trying to do is we're working on a project to detect changes in vegetation. So, you know, see vegetation grow over time. But, which would be pretty useful if you think about it, because you could then very easily measure how vegetation grows. One issue we found is that, as you may see in this bottom right image, shadows can be troublesome. You know, not to get too much into detail, but the blue and the red colors indicate changes from one time to another. And you can notice that a lot of shadows changes get detected, which we would prefer to avoid. So my current research work is trying to detect and classify and then remove the shadows and imagery from a UAV, specifically that one I actually showed previously. So in the top right there, we have an aerial image here from a UAV. And then in the bottom, after a fair amount of processing and tools, which I definitely won't get into details here, we have this image, which is just 2 things, shadow or not a shadow. So if you, for instance, look, say, here on the top image, you can see shadows here. It's still a work in progress, so we don't have everything. But if you say, look over here, you can see the shadows are more purple, while the non-shadows are less purple. Still a work in progress, as always, so it's not perfect. But that's a general goal, you know, use this sort of stuff to detect fine shadows. It's certainly really interesting, and there's a lot to do. But one thing I'm also working on recently is I'm trying to organize the process to make it more clear, because before it involves a lot of different programs and tools and the like. So I'm currently working on trying to use programming, specifically the Python programming language, to put everything together in one form. So, not to be one of those people who says, you know, oh, programming is the future of everything. I certainly wasn't until I started doing some work with Python, but it can be really handy, particularly for geography work. Like on the right here, I have some work I did for a course I'm taking, wherein I have code that took a bunch of addresses, you know, kind of searched them in online, like in Google Maps or MapQuest or the like, and then mapped them out with these little points using the code mentioned there. So can be really handy stuff. And if you're interested in geography, it might not hurt to try learning a little bit of programming. And I think there's a fair amount of free resources too, in case you ever wanted to give it a try. But anyways, that's enough about my research work. One other thing I wanted to speak about is Geography 101L, which is, it's the class I teach. It's an introductory lab course about physical geography. So we get a fair number of, you know, freshmen and the like. So if you go to if you take geography courses in undergrad in your freshman year, this will probably be the type of course you'll take in many places that you go to. So this class, we talk about stuff like solar radiation, continentality, hydrology, map reading, biogeography, a little bit of remote sensing, and more. Just for one quick little example of something we cover in this class, there's a website called USGS Earthshots, which highlights interesting things you can see from remote sensing satellites. So here we have an image of Mount St. Helens, Washington, on September 15th, 1973. So if I just asked in general, you know, what sort of seems to be in the question, what would you say? Nothing strict, but just, you know, what sort of appears in the image. One thing to note is that it's a false color image, which is basically a fancy way of saying we've changed normal colors. So in this image, plants and vegetation are red. So yeah, take a guess. You can write out in the chat. I'm not grading you on anything, so you know, just a fun little question.
Guess they don't know Mount St. Helens.
Well, if we go to the next slide. So here's Mount St. Helens 10 years later on May 22nd, 1983. What seems to have changed from the previous image? You know, we have previous image, next image, previous image, next image. What seems to have changed? A lot more red? Yeah, the colors have changed. So in the first image here, there's a lot more red in certain areas close to the mountain and less elsewhere. But then afterwards, there's a lot more red around the mountain, but nothing near it. So if you guys don't know, in 1983, Mount St. Helens, it's a volcano and it erupted in 1983. So what you're seeing here in all the gray is volcanic ash and debris spreading out across the landscape. So it's pretty cool you can see this from space, but you can. It's a really good way of measuring, say, you know, how much volcanic ash went out. So, and then the next one here is Mount St. Helens, Washington on August 23rd, 2020, which is, you know, about 40 years after the previous image. So can you sort of guess what may have happened after the eruption? Again, this image is in false color, so all the vegetation is actually red, not green. Yeah, the volcano, it came through, killed a lot of plants. But then over the years, into 2020 here, the plants have regrown. Yeah, you can see here we have, you know, for instance, let me draw a quick little line here. You see this green line here is kind of the boundary of the volcanic eruption. If I go forward, you can see now the boundary of the eruption is here. And so vegetation is growing back closer to the mountain again. Cool things you can see with remote sensing. So one last thing I want to add is I have a neat little page here with lots of resources and sites I've used in the course. This includes USGS Earth shots, where I got the those images from. There's also the NOAA solar calculator, which lets you see solar angles and the like. It's kind of neat. There's also Science in Your Watershed, which helps you learn about your watershed, which is, you know, how water flows where you are. And there's also USGS Topo View, which lets you see lots of cool old topographic maps of your area. And that's it. So thank you for listening. Hope it's been interesting. Any questions before we continue? If we have the time to continue, that is.
I'm following the chat, and Christopher is asking, is there a link? Yes, if you go to calgeography.org, and I'll show you the link again later, all of these presentations will be recorded.
Mm-hmm. I can also take all those links I said, and I can put them in the chat right here.
Oh, awesome.
Later, if desired. Any other questions, or shall we continue?
Well, let's go ahead and continue, and people can still continue. If they think of a question, we can follow it along in the chat.
Okay.
All right, that was awesome. Thanks for getting us started, Thomas. I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Sam Orndorff, who has been a veteran of Geography Awareness Week outreach, so appreciate you coming along. I'll put the calgeography.org website on the link, and then Thomas can put the other ones in there as well. All right, Sam, go ahead. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So, yeah, as you mentioned, this is my second year doing this. I'm hoping to keep it going every year. Uh, and it was interesting because last time I did this talk was a year ago, and so it was November 2019. I didn't finish writing this big thesis project at that time, and I had done some of the field work, and I was trying to figure out what I was trying to say. So at this point, Tom, you're going to get to see, everyone's going to get to see my, hopefully, a finished project here. So yeah, my name is Sam Moindorf. I got my master's degree here at San Diego, well, here at San Diego State. I'm currently a geography PhD student, and I actually got my bachelor's degree at Ohio State, also from Ohio. And my bachelor's was in international studies with a focus in economic development. So there's a little bit of that element in my research here. What I studied was a hydroelectric dam that was planned to be built on indigenous lands. So Tom had talked about indigenous lands, obviously historically, but my project is a very contemporary, so present day phenomenon. And how many people have ever seen a hydroelectric dam? Just type in the chat. I'm really curious, actually. All right, my chat's not popping up. So if you've ever seen a hydroelectric dam, they can be really large. They're built on rivers. And what they do is they stop the flow of water, and they basically regulate it. And the water comes flying down this giant wall of concrete. It turns a turbine, and it creates hydroelectric power or electricity. So what they do obviously has a really large impact on water and land. And it affects not just the animals that live there, so the non-human beings, but of course human beings are greatly affected. This picture that I have here is from the Three Gorges Dam in China. So like the name says, it filled up 3 gorges. It's the largest dam that's ever been built. Took several years. And a lot of people had to leave this riparian area, which is basically a fancy name for the sides of the river. Now, can anybody guess what some of the other impacts of building a hydroelectric dam would be? Take a second to think about it. Like, besides human beings having to leave the area where the flow of water stops and a big area gets flooded, fish are one of the main things that gets affected, obviously, and any aquatic species is going to have some kind of impact. And they're often thought of as being sort of, you know, green electricity, like as opposed to burning coal or burning oil. Well, we can just build hydroelectric dams and we'll create power that way. Oh, and guess what else? We'll also get this big flow of water. We'll get this big source of water that we can send to cities where people live so they have fresh water. So all of that's really great, but the question is, who's going to suffer when this whole area around a river gets flooded? So if you've ever been to the Hoover Dam, which is close to Las Vegas, it's about 700 feet tall, over 700 feet tall. And it's this massive power of what the government can do out on the landscape, right? So not only does it have this practical solution of creating electric power, it also opens up a lake that didn't used to be there, a human-made lake. But it also has this symbolic power, right? And they're hotly contested hydroelectric dams. So a lot of Native American groups and a lot of indigenous groups in Canada and in Mexico, as well as really the whole world, their lands are some of the first lands that get exploited. The rivers that they use every day to get food, to clean their clothes, just to drink water, you know, water their crops. Those are some of the first rivers where hydroelectric dams were built. So there's this strong connection between Native or indigenous peoples losing their lands and hydroelectric dams. And it goes back a couple hundred years. So what I wanted to research was this group, the Nayarit people. They live pretty much this whole area in the Mexican state of Nayarit. There's about 20,000 people who speak that language, has different dialects. So what I had to do for this project was really figure out how are these Nayarit people, how are the activists, the lawyers, people who know about law, environmentalists, how are they working together to stop this hydroelectric dam project? So this is a really biodiverse area. And what that means is there's a lot of different species, and even within the species, there's a high genetic gene pool diversity. So they can go ahead and survive for a long time. There's actually jaguars that live here, ocelots. In the bottom right, you'll see those. I'm actually curious, does anybody know what these things are here in the water? So that's the river, the San Pedro Mezquital River, where it starts to meet the ocean, creates this big wetland, this big, basically, swampy area. Does anybody have a guess what those might be? Boats. Well, kind of. They float, right? Yeah, pens for raising fish. Good job. It's actually oyster farms. So if they had built this dam that they planned to build, the flow of water would be greatly, greatly reduced, right? It would be a trickle. This whole area would dry up, and anybody who's trying to fish there, is going to lose their way of life. There's a lot at stake here. I'm starting to go over my time, but you could probably start to see, at least based on the way I'm telling the story, that it's not really a fair situation. You know, there are people who have been historically neglected or marginalized, and they don't have as much freedom to work in any kind of field that they want to. There's even sort of casual racism and discrimination in Mexico today. So it is an unfair situation, so it's what we call environmental justice issue. And because of that, people had to work together in a very tense situation also, because there are other cases where people will oppose the dam. They might hold protests, they might try to talk to their government officials to stop it from happening. And some of them actually might get killed. So you can see someone who that happened to. But the point is that there are laws on the books that say you can't just ignore indigenous people and just do whatever you want on their land and pollute and cut down all their forests and mine all the minerals on their land. So there are several laws. There's basically a group in the UN that's worked for a long time trying to get this law that says you have to get permission if you're going to build this giant electric dam, or if you're going to build a wind farm, if you're going to mine, or you're going to cut down the forest for timber. You have to get permission. You can't just stump on in, do whatever you want and leave. But unfortunately, in Mexico and a lot of other countries, that's not really a right unless it's enforced. So that's one of the things I had to study. So a social movement started to happen after the dam was introduced. Fortunately, they in 2019, right before I started to do my research there in Mexico, the dam was actually canceled because a judge said that this went through without permission, without consent. One of the things that also starts to happen when people come together and talk about their environment is different ethnic groups, people who speak different languages, people from the city, people from the countryside. They all come together and share ideas and learn from other people, not just in Mexico, but around Latin America and the world. So this sacred area that really lines the river, you can see here, people make I guess pilgrimage is the best word for it. This is, I think that's Saicota, or Kayatzita is actually the name of that place. So you can see some, at the bottom left, some Huidarica people, who are just cousins or sort of relatives of the Nayarit people. So what I did to figure out my answers was just talk to people in different organizations, environmental lawyers, activists. There was a teacher who I spoke to a long time. It's pretty hard to actually turn all of your research after you take hours upon hours talking to people, hearing their stories, making contacts. You have to turn that into writing, and that's a pretty tricky process. But I was able to find out that there's a new culture around environmental rights that's developing, and there's a lot of new linkages that are happening across time and place. Here's a few more pictures. So this community, this is actually the bridge between where I took this photo is the more mestizo or just Mexican neighborhood called San Pedro Izcatan. And then across the river is Presidio de los Reyes, which is almost 100% Nayeli. So there's a lot of difference. It's kind of the other side of the tracks, if you ever heard that expression. That's one of the tributaries of the main river. If you can read Spanish, you know what that says already, but there are murals all over. This one says you have the right to choose your gender. So I took 2 trips there, once in the dry season, which you can see on the left side, and once in the rainy season. And this is a subtropical climate. Hopefully Corey talks about that. And it experiences a really wet time of year and a dry time of year. This rock formation is a sacred rock formation called La Lusitana, which I actually wrote an article about, and it's free if you want to check it out. I'll get to that last. So my final point is that we're constantly expanding our projects to get more electric power, and it's going to continue to have an impact. Everything that we do has an impact, whether it's solar panels. They require minerals to be mined out of the earth and hammered out into a flat panel. Whether it's a dam or whether it's any other type of energy, it's going to have an impact. So final thoughts, yeah, you can check out that article. There's a link there. I will share my slides, a link to this actual presentation. The last thing I want to say, can you see this landmark map? Hopefully it'll take a second. So that's a good, this is the nativeland.ca is more historical, whereas landmarkmap.org contains a lot of new information. So this is one of those really helpful maps that I looked at that tells you communally held lands and indigenous lands. Last resource I have is this Environmental Justice Atlas, or ejatlas.org, which has all kinds of different development projects, farming, timber, all kinds of things, those big impactful things that happen on the landscape. It gives you a good overview of all of that.
That was awesome, Sam. Thanks. That's a lot of information to pack in, and thank you for sharing that research project. It would have been easy to say that's too much to fit in, but that was really cool to see how you approach the research problem and what it was like to actually go and do the work in the field. So very cool. And from Thomas to you, 2 really different types of ways of collecting geographic data. You get sensors and satellites, or you just ask people questions. Very cool. So if people have questions for Sam, go ahead and type them in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and toss it to the next speaker, Corey Monteverde, who is the only person I know who's been in the PhD program who also had a sister who is a graduate student in the department. So that's her unique claim to fame. Thanks for joining us, Corey, sorry.
No, you're good. Yeah, no, I am happy to be here. Yeah, so my sister, like you said, we went to SDSU together. We graduated last year with our masters. We shared an office and we also lived together. So that was a fun experience. And I will go ahead and share my screen. All right. All right, so again, thank you all for being here on a Friday afternoon. If I was younger, I don't know if I would have stuck around and listened to us present, but thank you for being here. We hope that we can enlighten you and excite you about geography. I think that's why we're all here. So hopefully you're finding our presentations exciting and informative. Like Tom said, my name is Corey Monteverde. I am a second-year PhD student in our department, and I actually graduated with my master's from SDSU as well. And for my undergrad, though, I actually went to UC Santa Barbara, and I didn't discover geography until about my 3rd year in. So it wasn't until my last year in my undergrad degree, my 4th year, that I really discovered geography and started to fall in love with it. So it's great that you guys are being exposed to the diverse world of geography and all the things that it has to offer. So I actually graduated my bachelor's in science in physical geography. So I really focused on meteorology and ocean processes, which was really exciting to study. But then I went to SDSU and I graduated with my Master's of Science in Watershed Science. And now I am continuing on with my PhD, but I really do focus on climate sciences. So for my research, I study climate change studies, and then I also do applied climatology. So basically the moral of the story is I love climate, all things to do with climate, and I included a lot of photos at the bottom here, all around the US. You have Joshua Tree, you have Kauai, you have Santa Barbara. I think I even included a thunderstorm on the very right that was in Orlando. And you know, climate isn't just about looking at clouds or focusing on temperature or studying winds. It's really about the processes and the interactions that the atmosphere has with all these different types of landscapes and also human involvement as well. So a question that you might have is, how is climate science geography? Is it geography just about maps and knowing countries and capitals? And honestly, I might have had the same question when I was younger too. I remember my first geography class, we studied a lot of countries, I had to memorize capitals and all that types of stuff. But geography is really so much more than just that. A lot of times, I'm sure all of us have gotten questions if we major in geography, and we're like, oh, people are like, what major are you in? We're like, geography. And they're like, oh, so you like maps and you study maps, right? And we're like, we do like maps, that's true. Well, that's not all we study. So I included this image here about different kind of like realms of geography. So a lot of times if we study geography, we kind of study more physical or human. There's also like a technical side as well. But yeah, geographers study so many different topics. And these aren't even, this isn't even an exhaustive list either, but you can study things such as transportation geography, political geography, medical geography, water resources, geography of soils, coastal and marine geography. But what I study is climatology, and it also branches away from meteorology. And climatology is the science that describes and explains the variability in space and time of the heat and moisture states of the Earth's surface. So it is a distinction from meteorology. So when you think of meteorology, you're thinking of more like weather patterns. So weather is type of more hourly to daily patterns, and climatology really studies those long-term changes in weather patterns. And we do that mainly for a large spatial variation. So all that to say, geography is a lot more than just kind of maps and memorizing countries and capitals. And my realm of geography is climatology. So what kind of stuff do I work on? And what kind of stuff do I use? So I work on climate change studies, and I use climate models to answer all of the questions that I have. And when we talk about climate change studies, we use climate models or advanced numerical models to simulate past and future climate. So whenever you hear in the media or in the news or even a scientist say, you know, we really need to stop global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius, or if you hear them say, you know, by 2050, we could see our region increase by 1 degree Celsius. Whenever you hear predictions of our future climate, those are used and produced by these climate models or advanced numerical models. So before I started my master's, I had heard of climate models, but I had no idea what they were. They were kind of like a black box to me. You maybe like shove some information in and you got an answer after you ran them. But these models are very robust and extremely helpful for scientists for predicting and knowing what our climate is going to be in the future. So I included a few images here. So what you see on the top left is kind of a schematic of what these models represent. So what they do is actually break our entire Earth into grid cells. And these are horizontal and vertical grid cells for our 3-dimensional models, which is what I use. And at each grid cell, they compute all of these different equations for our physical states of our Earth. And these equations are mainly physical. They describe motion and momentum and heat and equations of state. But I won't go into all of those equations. Again, you guys are not being tested. But what all of those cells do is actually interact with each other. And these cells calculate all of these equations over the ocean and land and for the atmosphere. And they really help us determine what is happening at each cell over our entire planet. And what they do is take all of those equations and put them into computer code. So the second image there is a little snapshot that I took from a module within my computer model. And so all of these equations are written into this code and then run on giant supercomputers. So that is the last image that you're seeing there. So basically when I run all of my climate model simulations for the future and for the past, I typically use supercomputers actually located in a completely different region than we are in San Diego. They're run on supercomputers in Colorado. And these computers, kind of imagine them as brains. So when I run my simulations, I'm using up to maybe like hundreds of brains of computer power. So they're really advanced models, and they're really helpful for scientists to be able to predict the future state of our climate. So I'm just going to touch on 2 points. I'm not going to dive into my research, but I just will kind of briefly describe what it is I research, where it is I research, and kind of the questions that I like to answer with these climate models. So this is mainly my master's work that I did, which was recently published, which is exciting. Took a lot of work, but it was totally worth it. This focused on how global warming would impact Southern California's precipitation, temperature, and then ultimately climate structures for wine grape crop suitability. So I included a picture there on the left of me at an experimental vineyard near San Diego, or Temecula. And what we really wanted to know is how the future climate of up to 2050, how that would really impact the suitability or regions where our particular crop would thrive. So I included a snapshot here of different maps that we created using our climate model data. And so basically for each of these maps, it's showing different types of suitability for this crop. So you can see on the bottom right map shows very little suitability. So basically whenever you see color, that's where this crop would like to grow. So these are the types of maps and the types of questions that we can use using our own data and our own results run from our climate models. So this was a big project that I worked on. And ultimately, what I would like to do is reach out to local wine growers to really help them and to know what information they would need so we can better kind of tune and adjust our own models to provide the people in the region that we live in with the best climate data that we can produce. So now for my PhD, I'm focusing in a totally different region, but still extremely important. So I will be focusing my PhD research in Brazil. And kind of one of the main questions that we first want to look at or answer is what are the past and future spatial and temporal trends of precipitation for the Brazilian Amazon? So the Amazon is an extremely important region, as I'm sure we all know. But there has been large amounts of deforestation that has occurred here, and that impacts local farmers and growers because when you do have deforestation, ultimately in time, there are decreases in precipitation, which could impact a lot of their crops and their farm practices in general. So what you see here, I included a map on the bottom right This is end of the century precipitation difference. So that's 2100. That's information all the way up to 2100. So that's a long time in the future. So basically what you're seeing is the change in precipitation. So we can get these types of results using our own climate model information. So basically wherever you see really dark reds in that map, that means that precipitation will or potentially decrease in that region, which could ultimately impact the people and potentially harm their farming practices and impact crop yields and potentially their cattle farms as well. So these are the types of questions that I use my own climate models to answer and to study. But as a geographer in general, you do get exposed to a lot of different opportunities. So as a graduate student, I was able to work in the National Weather Service office. So I was able to do and complete an internship over an entire summer there. So I included photos that I took of the National Weather Service office, which is actually located in Rancho Bernardo. And if we weren't in COVID times, you could actually go there and take a tour. But I was fortunate enough to be mentored by Alex Tardy, who's in the bottom right. And it was a great opportunity just to work at their office, use their own computers, engage with scientists. And yeah, a great opportunity for someone who is a geographer from our department. So this is a type of opportunity you can have as a geographer to really work with local organizations and government agencies to conduct your own research. You can also, as a scientist and as a geographer, go and present all of your work at different conferences. So this is a great chance to engage and speak with other scientists and get great feedback for your research. So these were different conferences that I went to. The top was actually in Washington, D.C. at AAG last year, and then the bottom two were at local conferences. So these are just some of the opportunities that you can have as a geographer if you're part of our program or another program. It's really exciting to engage in these types of opportunities. So in summary, being a geographer is really awesome. It really aligns with my passion of climate science, and it allows me to study climate change topics. And ultimately, I get to meet amazing new people along the way, like all of our presenters today. So I just want to say thank you, and I hope that you discover what brings you joy and what inspires your passion. Luckily, through geography, I'm able to study climate science, and that ultimately brings me a lot of joy and incites my passion. So thank you. And since everyone was also sharing different types of resources, I wanted to share this resource right here. It's kind of an awesome 3D real-time map created and projected by supercomputers. You can see all different types of overlays. You can look at wind or temperature and change the projections and look at different types of modes as well. So a really cool resource, which I will share to the chat. But thank you for your time and listening.
Awesome, that was cool, and very, very nice presentation. And we actually used and I don't know whether to call it the Earth website. It doesn't really have a name, but to look at the hurricane that impacted Honduras, so you could roll back and see exactly what happened.
Yeah, no, that's a great tool to have. Fun to use in class.
Yes, great. So thank you for sharing that. And we've got one more presenter, awesome presenter. This has been a joy to have SDSU so well represented. Jasmine Arpadian is a student who I've had the pleasure of working with directly. She happens to share the same PhD advisor as I do. So you know, we've chatted before. So Jasmine, I'm going to go ahead and toss it over to you. You're muted though. It had to happen to somebody.
It would have been me. No, I can't find my presentation now. One moment. I think I have too many windows open. Oh, there we
This
go.
happened to me. Don't worry. It's always when at that moment when you start sharing.
So today I wanted to just speak a little bit, and I think I have a few minutes to talk to you about a child-friendly cities project that a couple geographers from SDSU's geography department, where our group is developing in the San Diego area, specifically in La Mesa. And I wanted to talk a little bit about child-friendly cities, what they are, maybe how it relates to geography, why geographers are interested in this. And I'm sure some of you who are participating might be interested too, to maybe do something like this in your city. So a child-friendly city is a city, a town, a community that is committed to improving the lives of children in their jurisdiction. So the children who are living in their city. This definition, this was defined by UNICEF. So UNICEF is part of the United Nations. It's the United Nations Children's Fund. And this was defined by a UN convention. So the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And this is just like an international treaty or an agreement with different countries around the world. And there are a number of UN conventions. There's one on the law of the sea. There's another one on corruption. There's one against torture. But this UN convention is focused on the rights of the child, and it tries to get countries to agree to be committed to improving the lives of the children who are living in their country. So it's a pretty good cause. And actually, let me go back a little bit. And world leaders started thinking about child-friendly cities and this convention in 1989 when they realized that children, young people who are under the age of 18 might have different needs. They need maybe a little bit special care and maybe a little bit more protection than adults. So what does this convention spell out? It's basically, and what are the 5 goal areas? So basically, a child-friendly city in practice is a city where the voices of kids, the needs of kids, their priorities and their rights are important for government policies, what the city government does, their decisions, their programs. So what children need, this is a very important part in the way governments decide, on the laws that they make, in the programs that they develop. And there are 5 goal areas for child-friendly cities. So I have them here around the hand. So the first one is that every child and young person should be valued. They should be respected and treated fairly in their communities and by their local leaders. The second goal area is that every child and young person should have their voice, their needs, their priorities heard and taken into account. And like I said, in laws, policies, programs, every child should have access to quality social services, and every child should live in a safe, clean environment, secure environment, and every young person has the opportunity to enjoy family life, has the right to play and to leisure. So in a child-friendly city, these 5 goal areas are met, but also in a child-friendly city, even if these goal areas are not met, the local governments and the community organizations that are part of these cities, the leaders, the schools, they're really trying to meet these goals. Even if they're not met at the moment, they're working together to meet these goals. And what's important with UNICEF's child-friendly city work is that it's not only local governments, it's not only community organizations and leaders that are trying to make cities better for kids, but it's children themselves. It's young people themselves that are working to improve their lives and their situations. So in a child-friendly city, young people's opinions they matter. Young people are asked what they think should be different in their city. They're asked by people in their local government. They're asked by community leaders, by their schools. They're part of the conversation. So So I'm going to quickly go through some of this and try to show you some examples of ways that we can get young people involved in making their cities a better place for them. So like I mentioned earlier, we're starting this process in San Diego, so specifically in La Mesa, and that's why I'm talking about this. It's a project that is ongoing right now. So far, there are no child-friendly cities in the US. There are only cities that are trying to become child-friendly, that are doing this work to become child-friendly. And I'll show a map a little bit later. We have child-friendly, I'll just quickly go to that map then. So here are the countries in the world that have child-friendly cities, and you can see that the US is red, which means that we have cities who are working on it, but so far they haven't been recognized as a child-friendly city. So other countries seem to be more invested in this work. This seems to be maybe a priority in the way they govern. But we're trying to change that, at least in San Diego. So some ways that cities try to involve kids and try to listen to hear the opinions of young people is maybe incorporating this in lesson plans. So for instance, UNICEF Canada and some Canadian cities, schools ask children to play these roles, ask students to play these roles, pretend that they are the mayor, the reporter, the city council, and the citizen, and they ask them, if you are a mayor, what would you change in your city? How would you run your city? How would you make your city fun? What is fun about your city? How would you make it a better place? And this kind of youth involvement and participation, like I said, happens in other cities around the world. So like I said, there are many examples of child-friendly cities. Here, for instance, in Mumbai, India, this is how the project team is engaging young people, having them each of the, on the left-hand column, you see different goal areas represented by an image, and children rank the goal area, how if they think the city is accomplishing goal. For instance, is this city safe for children? You would give it a 20. Is it not? You would give it a 1. So this is how they engage children. In the Philippines, in Haiti, you have children engaged, asking them for their opinions about their city and their perspectives. In Rio de Janeiro, in Brazil, is another example of a child-friendly city and how they involve young people. In Sudan, sometimes the activities are different. Instead of asking participants to rank, and it depends on the age group, they ask them to move objects into different categories. And finally, children are also asked to map places. So just geography, the way we're talking about this. Map places that you feel are safe. Do you have places to play? Are there enough playgrounds for children in your community? And there are outcomes. There are concrete outcomes of these efforts. So one, the individual feels like they are more aware of children's rights. Children feel like, we have rights, we should live in a better community. Also, improved communication between generations, between children and adults, children and community leaders. And if we go to the other column, outcomes in the community, there have actually been concrete improvements in the community. For instance, in Rio de Janeiro, children and their advocates, through their advocacy, they were able to convince local government to put up this pedestrian bridge so they could a safer route to school, so they can get to school in a safer manner. So young people can make a difference. So I showed this map, and we are trying to, like I said, we have a project in the San Diego County area, in La Mesa specifically. We are working with local government right now, La Mesa City government, with the school district there, with some community organizations there, and with students in the La Mesa Spring Valley School District to hear about problems that they have in their community, ideas that they have about how to make their community better. And hopefully it could be the first child-friendly city in San Diego County, but not the last. Hopefully we can have more child-friendly cities in San Diego. I don't know if there's time for questions, but if there is.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jasmine. Anybody have questions for any of the presenters? They're all still here. While we're waiting, just want to say a real thank you to Miss Leon and her students from Bonita Vista High. Awesome to see you guys participating and asking questions. Anybody? Okay, they're shy. But this makes me genuinely proud of San Diego State University Geography Department. You guys all across the board, 100% awesome job. So thank you so much for doing that, for taking your time to share what you do, the kinds of questions that you answer, well, ask, and then hopefully answer. And people should know that if they come to SDSU and walk down the hallway, they're going to see, you know, people doing the kinds of research you've talked about and so many different things. They're going to be doing work here in San Diego and in California and Mexico, but also all over the world. So Corey, I'm looking forward to seeing your research site in the Amazon. And I just wanted to encourage everybody to follow the California. If you use social media type of stuff, there's some Twitter accounts you can follow. Cal Geography, SD Urbanist is me. Cal Global Ed for the Global Education Project. California Geographic Alliance also